When I was a kid, I grew up in northern Minnesota in a mining town, one of the world's largest open pit iron ore mine. Everyone's very proud of that up there. The Grand
Nice.
Canyon of the North. So when I was young, I grew up in Methodist church, and my mom just kind of volunteered around the church. Vacation Bible School is probably one of my favorite things because that church did some really cool stuff. Like when we were learning about being in the belly of the whale, they made like basically a room into the inside of the whale by hanging up trash bags and then having like fish inside to give it the like sea whale smell.
Oh,
And to this
wow.
day, that's like my most memorable moment in Vacation Bible School was when I was in the belly of the whale. My family switched from Methodist to Presbyterian very abruptly. My mom
Mm.
got diagnosed with a brain tumor, and that I hate to say it, a United Methodist pastor felt the need to tell my mom that her brain tumor was due to her sins.
Oh, wow.
And so we switched churches to the one that was 2 blocks away because really what's keeping us there? Methodist and Presbyterian in some ways share a lot in common.
Hmm.
Because I grew up in a household where my mom and dad raised me to believe that we could do anything. We could be anybody we wanted to be, princesses kill dragons too type of household. And so I didn't really think about it. I knew that I liked boy things. I knew that when I played make believe, I liked to be the boy characters almost exclusively. I didn't know drag kings were a thing. And then when one of my friends was doing a fundraiser for Transgender Day of Remembrance, I wanted to help contribute to it. But I didn't feel comfortable singing. I didn't feel comfortable doing a lot of performances. So I decided to give drag a chance. And knowing nothing about drag kings, nothing about doing drag, I bound myself down and glued on some of my own hair clippings and called it drag. But for me, the moment of writing a statement of faith and realizing that I didn't feel comfortable professing Jesus as my Lord and Savior was a
Mm.
moment where I'm like, I don't think I'm a Christian.
And did drag or your gender identity or sexuality ever conflict through that journey of trying to find where you're at now spiritually?
Not really. It conflicted more with my mom and individual rather than spirituality or even my personal like thoughts about like the Christian God. I didn't see him as conflicting with drag or being queer at all. My friend Dom, she was so patient and dealt with my text messages in the middle of the night as I was stressed and like, what do I do? What do I do now that I know I'm not cis? And she literally would just say, you go to sleep. And and she's like, it's the middle of the night. You don't do anything. You just live your life and try to make it the best life you can. And I am always going to be very lucky that I had a trans woman who's significantly older than me to tell me this advice. And she was actually an elder in the LDS church for a long time before
Mm.
transitioning. So she's someone who had a really difficult time coming to an understanding of herself, which made it really helpful to talk to her. And so
Mm.
through drag, learning about binders, learning about safe binding, I already had the binders for drag, so I could start wearing them during the day and seeing if that's how I felt best every day. So I really don't think I would have gotten top surgery if it wasn't for drag helping me explore what my body would be like. Because if it wasn't for drag, I would have been like, oh, $35, that's too much to just try this thing. Versus in
Right.
drag, you're like, gotta bind safely. I'm gonna wear the binder, I'm gonna try it. And then I think it just built some confidence that I deserved to feel as good as I do in drag all the time. That I shouldn't
Hmm.
have to wait for a drag show on the weekend to feel like I look like myself. I have done numbers that have a religious influence. So I've done Take Me to Church is probably one of my most religious numbers,
Hmm.
but it's an interesting one because I enter wearing robes and a stole and carrying a Bible and a communion glass.
Mm.
And as the song progresses, the way I have it choreographed is like someone is searching for answers in the book and getting increasingly frustrated and frantic and tearing pages out and crumpling them and throwing them. It's about like having the fire like inside of you. And it always
Mhm.
reminded me of like religious connotations. And so when I did Ames Pride last year, I did that for one of my numbers, and I actually had reached out to a bunch of local religious leaders who are LGBTQ affirming, and I had them join me on stage for like the last verse and chorus, and just
Mm.
like people holding hands and holding signs of like love and support, and just like assuring people who are struggling in their church, because there are Christians who are struggling to find a home. There's Jewish people. There's all sorts of people who are struggling to find religious homes because their faith
Mhm.
is strong, but they can't find a place that they can share it. And
Right.
so my mom and I are in DC. We're out in front of the White House, and there's a Latina woman speaking in Spanish, holding up a sign, and she's talking about transgender rights for transgender
Mhm.
women. And my mom was like, it'd be so much more effective if she spoke in English. And I'm like, Mom, I don't know if she knows English, and maybe her message isn't for you. And
Right.
then from that, we were able to build on that conversation to talk about how that woman's sign is, because I know a bunch of languages because I've studied Finnish, German, Russian, Spanish. It's a mess of languages, but we got to have a conversation about what that woman was talking about.
Mm.
And then that's actually when I told her I had top surgery, because she didn't know I had top surgery, because I wasn't willing to put myself through that. So it was like a moment of
Mm.
self-care of, I'm doing
Yeah.
this for me. You'll find out when you find out.
Yeah.
And even with hormones, it's not something that I talked to my mom about in advance, because I knew that I wanted that to be a positive experience for me, because it took so much to get there and to feel like that's safe and okay to do.
Right.
And the tipping point for me was actually when my stepdad got diagnosed with a brain tumor. So my mom
Mm.
had a brain tumor since I was 10. And then my stepdad got diagnosed with one a few years ago.
Wow.
Uh, and yeah, he had like a biopsy, and it wasn't good. It was just not looking good. And it was like that moment for me was when I was like, okay, he just barely retired, and this is the news he's getting. Like, life is clearly so short, and it doesn't go
Right.
as we planned. And it just felt like, what's the sense in waiting? Like,
Mm.
at that time I was 29, gonna be 30, and I'm sitting there like, man, if I wait, all that's going to happen is I'm going to be 35, I'm going to be 40, I'm going to be 45, I'm going to be 50, and still feel this way about
Yeah.
myself. Why would I do that when I could spend the most of my life living authentically? I already wasted, wasted isn't the right word, because I didn't feel as confined by gender as some folks might who are in more traditional situations. But it's almost like I spent enough time not feeling 100% present in my body, that why would I want to spend any more time not being present and not being in the moment with myself?
Yeah.